Zach from Gravel by California, back in San Luis Obispo. We're going to take in some fast riding with slow gravel. Now, I've made many trips up here before, and I could never spend enough time in the area. Well, today I'm glad to join Jason and his crew as we're going to do a loop that I've been coveting for a real long time, going into Cal Poly, up to Tower Road, and then down Highway 41 into Morro Bay before we make our way back. So, what's the moral of the story? It's gonna be fun. Let's roll. While I have a nose for great gravel destinations, no place have I laid down more vacation dollars than San Luis Obispo, as even CNN caught on to this as one of the best towns in America, with its perfectly scaled downtown and the Thursday night takeover for my favorite farmers market, where you'll make a lot of purchases based on smell. Whether by the surrounding hills, or the many options along the coast, or Montaña de Oro State Park, there's so many spots nearby to explore. And when I ran into the slow gravel group at Sea Otter, I knew I had to connect with Jason next time I was in town. This trip we decided to stay 15 minutes away in Pismo Beach, fulfilling our hope being a very dog-friendly place to visit that clearly kept this Central Coast mantra, taking part in so much nearby within walking range with a lot of personality to aid the wandering. Since I had time on this trip, I made my way to the other side of the 101, up to the Pismo Preserve, where Slow Gravel hosts a monthly ride, which was inaugurated just in 2020 with over 11 miles of single track, not to mention the other fire roads, that also caters its use to cyclists that I should have caught on to more, missing the bell as I went through the gate. You get the price of admission with this view right off the bat, already revealing the network of trails, confirming why the Central Coast has some of the best sunrises, thanks to many rolling hills allowing the morning light to roam. There were other riders out that morning, likely better prepared than me, as I had the luxury to just roam and explore, heading out to the northeast corner of the preserve, riding the Peekaboo Loop in the assigned clockwise direction that was 3/4 of a mile of flowing single track, worthy of doing a few more circuits. There were references to allow me to freely venture out, even riding above a sea of clouds, coasting down the appropriately named Discovery Trail, finding a number of hikers enjoying these early hours, as I savored these finely groomed trails, blazing down the high road on the way out, with my low point, realizing I had missed the bike bells.
Rat.
Showing up for the ride, it was standing room only, meeting at Scout Coffee San Luis Obispo downtown location, where a little jolt would be needed before today's robust route. Heading out of downtown, this half-century loop Jason put together throws a lot of highlights at you. The legs first get kicking, winding our way up Poly Canyon up to the railroad. The route swings around Old Stagecoach Road, climbing up, and then taking us across the ridge. Up top, we had 8 miles of views from all angles along TV Tower Road. Getting down might have been the biggest challenge of the day, heading into the Cerro Alto campground. We picked up a lot of speed going down Highway 41, but slowed for the views in Morro Bay. Our last stretch of dirt was a tug of war with gravity through the Nine Sisters region. All in all, this 50-mile loop finished with a 1-to-1 ratio on elevation and fun per person. We headed north on the omnidirectional Marsh Street, knighted as the primary users of the roadway, meeting Nate of the locally built Cerro Works, showing off one of their custom-built steel frames that makes you want to try all sorts of rides with them. Our route never seemed to be straight, both horizontally and vertically at the same time, especially traversing over the railway, which would play a much larger role later. We made our way into campus, cutting through the heart of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo that has been recognized as a bike-friendly university and a bit more friendlier with classes still 2 weeks away. Our first incursion onto dirt happened on the north end of campus, rolling into the appropriately named Poly Canyon, as the school also has its footprints into the hills that still represents the area's ranching history, evident by the number of gates along our route, hoping we were the only herd passing through. While I couldn't see where we were headed, everyone knew there would be climbing, also confident that the fog was only temporary, as it was a good thing to be riding in a group, leading the way up the Quercus Trail, that you could tell early would gain a lot of vert fast, climbing for 1.25 miles at 6.5%. Though the grade was rarely consistent, that's a hallmark of many single tracks. If you were paying close attention, you might notice the fog was lightening up a bit, as speed was a bigger factor not reading the sign, with the trail toggling us in every access, though still maintaining a great surface, gifting us with a good pace spinning smoothly. It was thoughtful to let us practice our cyclocross skills, even though it wasn't this ramp's primary purpose, and I got to show off more of my cycling prowess, playing the role of Mr. Bottleneck up top.
No! Sorry.
Maybe you don't have my amazing eyesight, but I was able to identify riding next to train tracks with 70% certainty, coming up in the train tunnel constructed in 1894, with a good call not going inside of it. I got to catch up with GBC Live guest Brian Yates, the force behind Atascadero's bovine classic that just continues to grow, as we start to weave away from the rail, taking a little downhill skill, and your head up for other trail users of all different types. It was time to transition off of this connector and onto a more storied road, climbing up the historic old Stagecoach Road as the first constructed passageway through the Cuesta Pass, built in 1877, that feels like improvements have been made since its inception. But there was another narrative working here as well, relating to our first encounter with the color blue, gracefully piercing our way above the clouds for our next chapter. We started our foray up TV Tower Road, with the pavement only being a temporary note, because soon after we witnessed our biggest payoff yet, riding above the clouds, just below the 2,000 foot mark, hoping my gravel heaven remark was figurative, because there should be a lot more riding ahead of us. Today's word for TV Tower Road was undulating, never leaving you in one gear for long, and allowing for contrasting views towards where the fog couldn't climb over the mountains, but we found some sharper angles of our own to ascend that you wouldn't get full value for the effort unless you stop to look around. Physics tells us we spend a lot more time climbing than descending, as obviously there's a yin and yang to that, with plenty of opportunity for gravel to do its thing, complemented by a width to choose your own pace, where you can rip, depending on the grip, being halted by the structure that should have a road named after. Oh. Underneath was a good spot for a regroup, getting a chance to meet John, owner of Scout, who's as smooth on his bike as his coffee, as this was not always the best environment for conversations, when these sweeping curves require extra attention, with the framing at mile 15, one of the day's highlights, not just reminding us again we were floating on clouds, but elegantly teasing us we'd be dipping into them too. We did get a chance to chat again, although not under the best circumstances, as Alan's Dynaplug made him my MVP for the day, with the group kindly waiting again under the next towers that also signified the point of no return, where the next descent would all but commit you to the full loop. I didn't know much what lay behind this gate, but I felt positive with the bulk of the group continuing on, although this section of the road had a different vibe, with the overgrowth not convincing me vehicles use this part as much, and the gravel a much grainier texture than before, though not as egregious at first, with the bigger issues coming into play when the grade took a nosedive. That was also a factor in making the conditions far more loose, which paired with me not replacing my lost air, creating a problem.
Boom! Boom! You see that coming.
I was jazzed to have Jason lead the rest of the way, as it's been a mystery plotting out how to get to Highway 41, with Strava's heat map not showing a favorite how to bridge these 2 miles, going with local knowledge down the AT&T trail, not expecting my earlier statement to be put into signed form. We obviously were venturing into tighter quarters, likely aided by vehicles unable to fit into this portion, having trouble spotting Jason with his color palette, as reaching the wider spaces also presented a different problem, where you were better off walking down this grade, although free enough to get a wipe down from the poison oak. Even with some of the stopping, it didn't take long to reacquaint ourselves with our saddles. As hikers were a good sign, we weren't too far from the campground, but Brian's positioning might have raised hairs for some change ahead, as the canyon trail was a momentum shifter with pockets that tested your technical ability, meaning it was smart that the group spread out, although that meant finding a line on your own, which in some cases was your best play. I'm pretty sure I made it out okay, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to make this video, with the Cerro Alto campground properly placed for a refill. But I was glad to have some heads up from Andreas that played a big role in today's crowd, being his birthday ride, warning me about the tree in our way, or the road built around it, enjoying the speed, but making sure safety was priority number 1. We were only at mile 22 coming out of the campground, but our progress would improve on Highway 41, and while it was 8 miles of downhill into Morro Bay, we had 2 types of velocity kicking in here, with the first third at more of a grade that put the group into glide mode, but eventually the road started to flatten out, changing the structure of our formation, as it was paceline tactics from here, with a strong number still participating. The pace was high, and I seemed to be falling into the rotation, but I was experiencing a problem spinning at these high speeds. My top gear was skipping, even keeping a regular tempo, so when the sprinting started, I knew I could lose control accelerating, so goodbye everyone, until I regroup in a pretty good spot, taking the scenic loop around Morro Bay, with yes, the rock getting most of the attention, although geologically linked to more formations we'd be riding between, which makes you lose a little sight of the marina that would be stop-worthy if we didn't still have more riding ahead. It's a different flavor riding away from the town, as the estuary is a sight of its own, but at these speeds, it's good my cameras were rolling themselves, with many angles that are exceptional, as a great send-off before our final dirt incursion. With a quick sidebar on Bay Boulevard, we had an even briefer experience on the Turtle Rock Trail, kicking off a series of inconsistent directions in every axis, beginning back on the Bay Trail, and then to the more contextually named Quarry Trail, where there was a lot of weaving within our limited space. While our dirt collection here totaled about 3.5 miles, it felt robust enough for one of those "I only have an hour to ride" rides, and there was a fair amount of grinding upward that I knew would eventually pay off if Newton made any sense. But I was also focused on the peaks we were weaving through, known as the Nine Sisters, although there are 23 of them, that are a series of formations from volcanic activity 20 million years ago. But like the Hawaiian Islands, the plates move, creating a string of land formations, except thankfully, these are extinct. For the unoriented like me, this regroup at the junction was welcomed as we headed out towards the Crespi Loop that had a lot of fun obstacles below for play, while the surface was in pretty good shape without extended efforts to grind you out. The most memorable part of the sector were these concrete blocks for its length, entertainment, and surviving its narrow width. And while there was plenty of enjoyment between the greenery, you had to save some of your attention for the poison oak. The final stages looked like we were prepping for takeoff, but the gravitational reality set us down to Turi Road, that is one of the earliest cut-throughs across Los Osos Valley, which its character probably hasn't changed much over time, with hawks staking their claim to the peaks, leading us to one last descent, if only we could cash in on our golden surroundings. Our counterclockwise loop merged onto Los Osos Valley Road, taking advantage of the tailwind back into town, splitting back with Jason onto Foothill Boulevard. Super thankful for leading this complete fast and slow adventure.
If you've only driven through this area, everything about it is exactly as you'd want to be. I mean, the riding was fantastic. Definitely the trails and roads up there just really accentuate the Golden Hills. Another big thanks out to Jason for putting this all together. I mean, it wasn't just the route itself, but just exemplifying what a great cycling community we have and everyone that came out. I love this area, that's why I keep coming back, and you probably should too. Anyways, if you want to support us, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, go to our shop, or support us on Patreon so we can bring you more from the State of Dirt.